Can I ask you to perhaps just take your seats so that we can get going again with our next session? Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. My job is quite easy this time around. Mr. Makwetu has done a very good job of already introducing Jens. Jens, we know about your important work at the United Nations, but we also know that when we started looking around, we know about your extensive capacity development experience. And we're very glad that you can join us here. So if I can hand over to you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Discussing capacity development is a very broad task, but I thought in this presentation here, we will try to narrow it down to look at some of the aspects of it, some of the constraints, maybe ways we can accelerate it, and maybe ways we can scale it. But I'd like to kick us off with some characteristics around capacity development and capacity that I kind of think is the foundation for reflection on these matters. And the first thing is, capacity, in a very simply put, is of course an institution's or a human being's capacity to deliver result. It has some kind of results orientation. And capacity development, this is simply getting better at it. So that's, in a sense, the definition side of things. However, capacity development at the institutional level is a little different from capacity development for the individual. Normally we would say, as an individual, the more capacity you have, the better it is. However, this is not true for an organization. And the reason is, capacity costs money to develop, and once you have acquired capacity, it costs money to maintain it. And because capacity is not only people, it is systems, it is approaches. So that means an organization needs to calibrate the capacity it needs to develop commensurate with the goals that it's trying to achieve, or the results. It is not an open-ended proposition. So the term we use for that is requisite capacity. In other words, what capacity do you need really to deliver the results for what you set out to do? And then finally, because capacity costs money, and because any institution cannot hold all capacity, we fit inside some kind of an institutional ecosystem. And we need to kind of put some boundaries around what capacity is core to our mission and we want to keep there, and what capacity we want to take from elsewhere. So the third part in doing capacity and capacity development correctly is to have some kind of strategic thinking about what is it that we will do in-house and what is it that we will outsource. And in my experience, a lot of these discussions are kind of papered over in a way that we end up in a situation where more capacity is always better. But it's really important to emphasize that capacity is like capital investment. You need to do it the right way, but once you have acquired it, it needs maintenance, and that means recurrent cost. So constantly when you run INTOSAI, a supreme audit institution, it's important to get those balances right. So if you're with me so long on the theory, then I wanted to take us forward into somewhat more practical. It is striking when I studied or prepared for this presentation that INTOSAI and CBC and related bodies, they have done a lot of work on strategy and results for what. So that means, for example, you have a very clear forward-looking strategy that makes it much easier to discuss, yeah, but it is a capacity development for what? What are we trying to achieve? What are we trying to get at? What is also clear is not only is there a lot of strategic thinking on where we want to go as a global body, but that also I assume, helps individual SAIs to find out where they fit in and how, in a sense, they can prepare their plans. You also have standards. Now, it's not coincidental that I selected number 12. It was also mentioned in the opening remarks. But it's, again, striking to see that a lot of work has been done to say, here are the standards we need to reach, and therefore we need to build capacity for this. You even got internal management standards. That means standards for the important part of the SAIs, and I can see it also with tomorrow's agenda, is of course human resources management. Even for that, you have clear reflections internally on what is a good standard, what is the type of capacity that you need. And then finally, it has been mentioned that capacity development very often partnership driven. And again, there's a standard for that. You clearly have collaborated with OECD, so there's now a standard for good practices in supporting SAIs. So I was kind of wondering, what is the issue then? If we have standards on how to do it, we know where we're going, and we even have very good guidelines for how to do it, why are we not sure we're getting there fast enough, or is there more to be done? And here I think there is more to be done, and that is by shifting focus. What is clear is what is to be done, what is clear is, in a way, how to do it. But in a traditional developing or capacity development scenario, we will then go through what is the enabling environment, what are the needs organizationally, what are the individual needs. But the point I want to make is you want to shift the focus away from the analysis of what needs to be done towards where is the opportunity. Because when the needs are clear, it is the opportunity that is the barrier. And only, or not only, but mainly you as leading SAIs or being senior members in SAIs, you will know wherein lie the opportunity. Where's the entry point? Is the entry point in the enabling environment? Is there a new government opportunity? Is there legislation that's being discussed? Is there something about my institution that creates an entry point? Or maybe I've hired a lot of people, or maybe I have a lot of vacancies, so it's at the individual level there's an entry point. To build capacity, it is not enough to understand the need. It is also essential to understand the opportunity. And very often, we underestimate the opportunity discussion and overemphasize the needs. And in that case, then the collaboration becomes supply-driven and does not leave an impact. The other point I wanted to make is here, that very often the opportunity is created maybe through individual training. But if a person is trained, a person returned back to the same institution with the same legislation, the chances there will be any difference is close to zero. In other words, more than one part has to move in order to build capacity for result. And building capacity for result of an institution is different than building capacity in an individual. So it's very important for me to emphasize. So if you accept that maybe it's important or as important to look into opportunity, be more tactical, be more, you can nearly call it opportunistic in trying to drive a development or capacity development effort forward, then there's another thing that will help. And this is that we need to think a lot about which problem we're trying to solve. And the danger of having standards and the danger of having how-to guides is that, in a sense, it is felt, well, we have already discussed that, we've codified that in the books, and therefore we know what the problem is, we know how to solve it, now let's just get organized and do it. That's not correct. One really needs to sit down and have another conversation about what is the problem we're trying to solve, and very importantly, then define the area to focus upon. And often in define the area to focus upon sits the entry, the opportunity side. This is where you collaborate with those with the SAI in question, and only that institution will really know where to focus and why to focus. The other point I want to make here is, in the dark purple area to the right-hand side, it may benefit you to projectize your solutions. In other words, you may have programs at the global and regional level today, but it may benefit you to have specific projects per individual SAI that bundles together what is the problem, which part of that problem are we focusing on, how we're trying to do the solution, and how do we organize the solution. The other advantage with a project can handle more complexity, and therefore a project can call for different partners to come and solve different problems. And finally, if there's good governance around a project, it's easier to adapt. The situation changes, the project changes, and to formalize that adaptation. So you may find that a very effective way of accelerating some of the efforts that you want to do in capacity development is by projectizing your solutions. In doing so, capacity development is a system term. So this means capacity development insists on complexity. Capacity development requires you to think of the enabling environment, the institution, and the individual in some kind of an interplay. And therefore, it's very rare that the solution is linear. It's very rare that you can say, here's the problem, here's the solution. Because even if you do so, you missed where's the opportunity. Who's going to drive this? Who's going to own this? Is there money enough to pay for the staff afterwards? So try maybe to bring people in to assist you that can handle what's called design approaches. They look a bit more messy, but at the end of the day, they create much better projects. So that means from an acceleration point of view, by getting it right the first time, you actually get to the solution faster, even though it can look, as I said, a bit messy. Then I just wanted to shift level a little bit. And we discussed, and in the introductory remarks, the Sustainable Development Goals as a frame was mentioned. And I think the CBC chair did correctly identify that INTOSAI itself, and that means each and every one of your institutions, you impact directly on goal number 16 because of the transparency in finance, because of anti-corruption and other things. However, goal number 17 was also mentioned, and I'd just like to repeat that and saying that goal number 17 is saying that if we are to move the Sustainable Development Goals forward, which, if I may remind you, is probably one of the only frameworks in the world where all countries have actually signed up to. It's the only framework in the world that has officially been translated into many more languages than UN languages. And it's the only framework in the world where so many countries report back voluntarily every year at the UN. So it's a very important common framework for moving forward. And here, I think it's important that you consider this committee, but also INTOSAI broader as a Goal 17 organization, a multi-stakeholder organization. And why do I mention it? It's because capacity development interventions are multi-stakeholder. And it's a good way of reminding oneself the best capacity development interventions are that. And then, so I just took it one step further, and that is, if you go with the framework, there's actually a target, and there's even an indicator that is global. In other words, what if CBC start reporting on its Goal 17 contribution? Many of you could then report that through your own governments as your government's contribution to Goal 17 also. So, and I wanted to go back then to the Sustainable Development Goals, but this is because of another argument that I will make before I close. And that is, looking ahead, I mentioned that you have an impressive kind of framing. You have your strategy plans, you have your standards, you have internal standards, you even got codified collaboration best practices. Looking ahead, capacity development for what? It's quite obvious, and I can see it in the community, capacity development for being able to support the Sustainable Development Goals, or maybe even for playing a state auditor role in the execution of the Sustainable Development Goals. I think this may be something that could be of interest for you in the days ahead. The other part is that there are two areas. If I put on, you can say, my international UN hat, there are two areas that I think are coming up, which I see many institutions start thinking about, and which I think the size should probably be a little bit ahead of that. And this is cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. I know that they're being discussed in your community, but I just wanted to offer that you may want to think about, are these relevant? What is the scope for size in that space? What capacities then do we need to develop to do this? And where can size partner to enhance this capacity? Again, coming back to this notion, not all capacity needs to sit with you. The core needs to sit with you, but you need to know where you're going to get the other thing from. You need to be explicit about that. So I wanted to stop here in a sense by just some concluding remarks, and then I hope maybe we can take the conversation forward through whatever format you will choose. But I wanted to conclude by three things. I wanted to say that a good way of redefining what is a barrier is to shift focus towards focus on the opportunity that sits with each of your organization, and in a sense derive the needs from that analysis. And then emphasize that context matters. That means that while there are standards globally for what a supreme audit institution should be able to do, how you do that in a specific context is not only a technical matter. Most of you will hopefully agree with me, it's a leadership matter. It is a matter how to operate in an imperfect world, and it's maybe sometimes also a capacity to navigate difficult political environments. So therefore, context truly matters when we put down interventions deliberately to accelerate capacity development in this space. That brings me to the second opinion, projectize partner-supported interventions, and play the whole piano of triangulation, peer-to-peer, multi-partner. A project can handle that. And we can discuss a little bit whether one really needs project management expertise to do this, and I will offer that you don't, but we can discuss that a little bit more. Finally, if you projectize, you can then scale because you can create portfolios. And you can create portfolios of two types. You can create portfolios of projects that you do across CBC, and more importantly, every institution can create pipeline. That means, in other words, every institution can say, I got 4 needs, I got 5 needs. I will projectize them. The minute that you find out 4 or 5 size have the same need, you can bundle the projects and they may be easier to finance. The other reason is that with Sustainable Development Goals and Goal 16, there may be new sources of funds available for you to interact with, and they will react only to project and project portfolios. So this is a little bit from the technical side, but nevertheless, this is what it is. So with those remarks, I wanted to stop my intervention here, hoping that we can take the discussion forward. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
I think it has been, if it was inspirational, then it has given us another inspiration to think about capacity. And I must commend, in a very short space of presentation, you've captured some very fundamental issues which we are struggling with. For instance, as you talked, my mind then says that the way we look at capacity is, there is at one end, there is the people approach it from needs. But then I think what we should be saying, look at the opportunities, approach it from the opportunities. Therefore, you have a quantum of space where you must now start defining capacity and start seeing capacity vis-a-vis one's state. Because at the need side, you'd have a lot of sides, for instance, who would be just looking at needs. But I think we need to be moving up the scale towards the opportunities. So this is where the definition of the new view about capacity we should be looking at. But if we are going to go towards that thinking of opportunities, we must then be putting ourselves in an environment which is evolving. And it is indeed evolving, which means that the auditor of yesterday and the auditor which is midstream and the auditor which is of the future is completely changing. And therefore, even the capacities that we are trying to build should be now one which looks at the opportunities, should be one which is looking at the auditor which is going to audit within the cyber space. It should be one which, of an auditor who is saying, look, you are actually now going to deal with the mass of data out there. It's no longer going to be, this invoice and so forth. It will be, to what extent can you analytically evolve to start thinking analytically? And that means you need to look at the opportunities out there. There is the opportunity of the cyber. There's the opportunity of the big data out there to analyze. And then there's opportunity of the information technology space. But then there is the demand, also the requirement of the stakeholders, the increasing and changing demand of the stakeholders for accountability in a different form. And that then leads us that the stakeholders are looking at the 17 DGs which we are talking about. So we are going that side. That means we need now to start exploiting these various areas. And that's what I'm taking from your talk. And I think